Today is the 8th of April, 2009. We are at the Buffalo Erie County Historical Society. My name is Wayne Clark. My assistant is Kathleen Matthews. And sir, for the record, would you please state your full name and your date and place of birth?
Thomas Francis Higgins. I was born on January 26, 1930 in Our Lady of Victory Hospital, so I guess that would be Lackawanna, New York. Second oldest of 9 children from Irish immigrant parents.
Did you attend school there?
No, I attended school at St. Stephen's Grammar School on Elk Street. We lived in the First Ward in Buffalo. And later on, after grammar school, I attended South Park High School for a year and a half. And because of the extreme poverty situation in our home, I quit school and went to work. And I worked for a couple of years in the Discharged Coke Corporation. And then the Korean War broke out in around June 26th or 27th of 1950. And we were all quite concerned about that. And later on that year, in the fall of 1950, I went up to enlist in the Marine Corps.
Okay. And what made you decide on the Marine Corps?
Well, I think in World War II, growing up, I was actually 15 years old when World War II ended, and most of the older boys in the neighborhood who went into the service joined the Marine Corps.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, a very good friend of mine in grammar school's brother was killed in Saipan. He was in the Marine Corps, and the Marine Corps sort of appealed to me, and so. Mm-hmm. A buddy of mine and I both went down to what now is Erie Community College, the old post office, and enlisted. And
you went in 16 January 1951?
That's correct.
Where did they send you for your basic training?
Parris Island, South Carolina. We went down there, took the train down from Buffalo to Washington, D.C., laid over in Washington for about 10 hours, and then boarded a old broken down train called the Atlantic Coastline. I think it went back to the days of the Civil War, and we went down, and it was my first introduction to the Jim Crow laws. After we left Washington, when we got to Virginia, the train pulled over to a stop, and black porter come and got the black enlistees. There was about 6 or 8 blacks on the train with us, and took them into the back of the car and kept them there till we got to Parris Island. So that was my first experience with the South.
Mm-hmm. Was that your first time away from home?
Yes, really. I had never flown on an airplane prior to that, and no, I don't recall. I think that was about I don't recall going any other place. Up until that time, I never saw Niagara Falls, so mm-hmm. I would say I wasn't away from home very much.
Okay. What was your basic training like?
Oh, it was tough. Marine Corps it's not a piece of cake. It's a very tough training. A lot of discipline, a lot of esprit de corps. They sort of tear you down one side and try to eliminate all the bad habits you acquired during your brief lifetime, and then build up the Marine Corps standards and mottos and the esprit de corps and make a Marine out of you, and it stays with you for the rest of your life. They always say once a Marine, always a Marine. Is very mm-hmm. true.
How long was your basic training for?
That was 12 weeks. And we got a 10-day leave when that was up. Actually, I graduated from Parris Island on the 17th of March on St. Patrick's Day. There was a platoon 49. Our sergeant was Sergeant Bennett. He was a real tough DI drill instructor. And I got a 10-day leave to go home. and then we were reported back to Paris Island, and about a month later we boarded a troop train across the United States to Camp Pendleton, California, where we got 12 more weeks of combat infantry training. And then on the early July of 1951, we boarded the troop ships. There was 3 ships, and we shipped out to Korea.
Now you had strictly infantry training
Yes.
at that point? Okay. And what was your trip to Korea like? Did you get sick aboard boat or?
No, it never bothered me, but at that time of the year, the Pacific is almost as calm as this top of this table. It was very, very calm. And to break up the boredom on the ship, they had held boxing matches aboard the ship. And so I volunteered to go and box in a ring. My boxing career came to an abrupt halt on the ship. I lost the fight. He didn't knock me out, but I lost the fight. And I'm glad I lost it because the next day, the guy that beat me got pounded. So I said, no, I wouldn't want a career of boxing.
And what was the food like?
It's GI food. They went on a ship with feeding several thousand of us on the ship. The 3 ships was equivalent to a whole division. It wasn't a division per se, but there was enough men to fill a division on the 3 ships. A lot of it was, prepared food, powdered eggs and stuff like that. But it was okay. It was, it wasn't. We weren't starving. We were all right.
And whereabouts did you land in Korea?
We landed in Busan, Korea. Got there on the 15th of July. It seems like the 15th is around the number that the time I enlisted, the time I got out. We landed in Busan, and as we embarked there, we got off the ship there, and we lined up, and your name was called out, and the guy hollered out my name, and I raised my hand, and he said, item battery, 3rd Battalion, 11 Marines. And they pointed to where that was, and some sergeant directed me over there. And I said, what outfit is this? And he says, it's artillery. I said, I don't know nothing about artillery. I was infantry trained. Well, you're in artillery now. And they took a whole bunch of us and put us on an old DC-3, one of them old World War II transport planes. And it was my first time in an airplane, and we sat along the bulkhead of the airplane with our rifle between our legs and all squeezed together on the plane. And they flew us north up to an airfield in central South Korea near the front lines. And then we got off the plane there and they put us on trucks. And I ended up in a place called Artillery Valley. And I told the sergeant when I got there, I didn't know one thing about one end of the gun from another. I really never saw a 105 artillery piece. But they trained me right there in the field. I got on-the-job training, and we were, at that time, the 1st Marine Division was in reserve. But it's always strange luck. The 3rd Battalion, 11th Marines, was kept on the line, and it was reassigned to the 2nd Army Division, the Indian Head Division. So we were detached from the 1st Marine Division and attached to the 2nd Army Division, and there was a lot of firing. It's tough work, handling these big guns and all the ammunition. So we're up in the central Korea on the front lines. I learned that in about a week I could do everything everybody else could do. I could line up the gun and everything, pull my watch, had a headset phone on. They would holler fire mission, and I'd get the crew out. There was 6 guns in our company, and there's 3 companies, it's 18 guns. So it's a lot of firepower. So we were firing alongside Army units and even 155s, which was a much bigger artillery piece, was behind us. The noise was ear-shattering. And speaking of that, we had no ear protection at the time, and a 105 has a tremendous crack to it. It's a powerful weapon. And so we stayed there, and then for about a month, and then we were reassigned back to the 1st Marine Division. In September, the kickoff for the push up to the west coast, we ended up north of the 38th parallel on the east coast, in the mountains of the east coast. And there's a good book out there called The Coldest War, written by a gentleman by the name of James Brady. He's quite a famous writer. He was a lieutenant in one of the infantry companies. I didn't know him at the time, and when I read his book, I said, my God, it was like every other page. I knew what he was talking about. I said, I was there. It was very strange. In fact, I called his home in Florida to thank him for writing that history, because it meant an awful lot to a lot of guys like myself as a keepsake and a memory of where we were and what we did.
Now, you said you got your on-the-job training. You could do everything with the gun. How did you? This is something that I've never had explained to me. If you were firing at a certain grid coordinate, there was adjustments that would have to be made to the gun. Now, were those coordinates given to you guys by whoever wanted the fire mission done, and you'd have to put those coordinates into the gun?
Yeah. What happens is the FO, the forward observer, when they first get on the line and they're in a position, they have a map of the terrain that it's in front of them. So they'll mark a target. They'll fire out a Willie Peter, white phosphorus. They'll mark the target, and once they know they got the coordinates, they'll call in the coordinates to the FDC, Fire Direction Control Center. They'll call in the coordinates, and then they're put on a graph. So if there's any movement in that particular area, he's already knows the coordinates. He doesn't have to redo it. It's already been done. So we get a field of fire here. All our front is covered, and then the company next to us would do the same thing. I had been on the gun for about 5 or 6 weeks, and it was bull work. It was a lot of firing. And in the first kickoff, we lost 3 radio operators with the forward observation team, and they didn't have another radio operator. And since I was infantry trained, and I kind of missed my buddies that I developed friendship and relationships with, I volunteered to be a radio operator on a forward observation team. So, again, I didn't know too much about radios, but I didn't think it'd be that hard. So the sergeant took me out in it was of all things a cornfield. You would think it would be a rice field, but it was a cornfield. And he was teaching me how to operate the radio and the do's and the don'ts, and the language of a radio operator. Actually, a radio operator is just repeating what the scout sergeant or the lieutenant in charge is telling you, so you just repeat it on the air. And while he was instructing me, On the operation of radio, we got incoming, and we're both of us are down between the furrows of the rows in the cornfield. The corn had been picked, but at the fall time it wasn't high, and we were hugging the ground so we wouldn't get hit with shrapnel. So that lasted a few minutes, 4 or 5 minutes, and so we got back to what we were doing and scooted out of there, and I ended up going up with fire team. The first infantry company I joined was a Howe Company, 3rd Battalion, 1st Marines, and we were up for quite a while with them, and later on we were with the Fox and Easy companies of the 5th Marines, and after January or February 1952, we ended up with the 7th Marines. So technically, I served with every regiment of the 1st Marine Division. You're part of the infantry company. You're the eyes and ears of their for the company commander and the platoon lieutenants, and we worked very closely with all the officers. I was probably around, I was only a corporal, but I was probably around the officers more than I was with the enlisted men, because that was the nature of our work.
What was your living conditions like out in the field?
Well, we lived in the underground in bunkers. Wherever we ended up, you dug in, and if you're going to stay for a while, you keep digging. There was plenty of trees down. We just took tree limbs and put them over the hole that we dug in the ground and put sandbags on that and kind of piled it up. And if you ever took a direct hit on one of those bunkers, you'd been buried alive. They'd probably never get you out. So we were up there, went through Christmas, it was bitter cold. But once you're inside with a small stove, and your sleeping bag was a down sleeping bag, so we slept. We were able to sleep and not, we weren't freezing. Let me put it that way.
Do you think your clothing was adequate?
And we were the second winter, yes. The first winter they got caught short with. They were still wearing summer clothes. They didn't have enough of. They did eventually get the parkas up to them. But we were the first troops to wear what we call the Mickey Mouse boots. The toe of the boot was raised. It looked like the cartoon character Mickey Mouse. And we wore those. Those were excellent. They were absolutely wonderful. There was instructions with it that if you get wet, dump the water out of if it was going to water. Take the boots off, dump the water out, wring out the socks, put the socks back on, lace up the boots, tuck your pants into them, and proceed on. And that's exactly what happened to me on Christmas Day when I was going back to the line. I had gone all the way back to the division headquarters for Sunday Mass. The Cardinal Spellman said the Mass. And I didn't anticipate going back there. I didn't even know, and if I did know, I probably wouldn't have went because I was filthy. We were on the line. I hadn't had a shower in over a month. I had growth of beard. My clothes were filthy. So I wouldn't have never gone back there. But I ended up there, and on the way back, a blizzard. We got hit with a blizzard, and I had to go on foot the rest of the way where I could hitch a ride on any military traffic going through there. And I fell through a stream. I was crossing the ice. It wasn't but two feet deep, but enough to fill the boots with water. So I got out of there and got on the other side and took the boots off and did exactly that, dumped the water out, wrung out the socks, put the socks back on, and got up and started walking again, and walked to the top of the mountain. Took me most of the whole day to get back. I didn't get back to the top of the mountain until about 5 o'clock in the afternoon. I ended up in the wrong wrong company, but I knew at least sort of where I was with the snow. It was getting dark, and there were some FOs up there from another company, so I hit them up for a beer. Somebody had passed a bottle of whiskey around, took a shot, took a swig of that, and then I proceeded on my way along the line, but I got out, I made a wrong turn someplace, and I got out, and everything looked so different, so strange, and then I fell in a huge shell hole filled with snow. Got the heck out of there, got myself orientated back, and then I took out time and looked out, where the heck am I? So I backtracked and I got back. So I finally got back to my unit, and by that time I was pretty well tired and soaking wet from sweat and everything. And so I got in my bunker, and we didn't have any fuel oil. Well, we didn't have Christmas Day. We had no food, no fuel. There was just whatever sea rations you had. And helicopters couldn't fly because of the blizzard. And so I stripped down to got my wet clothes on, and I crawled in the sleeping bag for warmth. And so I thought, well, I'll start this little bit of kerosene I had left. And it ended up, anyhow, the whole thing blew up on me. I ended up outside in the blizzard, semi-naked, just with the top on. And I grabbed, I had the radio in my sidearm. I carried a 45 because being a radio operator. And I got my Mickey Mouse boots. And I was outside in this blizzard naked, and I knew if I didn't get inside pretty darn soon, I would die. It was that bad. So anyhow.
Now, were you burned?
No, I wasn't burned, but my sleeping bag was burned, and the rubber air mattress I had, that was burned. So I got in. I saw a little light, and it was very deep snow, and we're on the side of this hill. And I made it there, and it was the young, and I regret to this day I didn't get his name, the young Korean interpreter. He was 15 years old. And he had an old Papa San in there. It was an old man, we called him Papa San. And Papa San was in there, and Papa San was drunk. And they had some booze. So these kids were always sharp. They were always pilfering, they're picking up this and picking up that. I couldn't blame them because their living conditions were terrible because of the war. And they acted as interpreters, and this kid wasn't bad. Well, he ended up, my feet by that time were freezing, and he rubbed my feet, and my feet were really freezing. When the circulation started coming back, it was painful. Well, in any event, he gave me some wool sacks. He gave me it was all Army equipment, by the way. He stole from the Army. God bless him. And he gave me Army pants, Army shirt, and socks, and it was well paid, good clothes. So he got me, I got myself squared away with him, and I was able to get out for a while, and I started looking around, where am I going to spend the night? And I saw oh, he had a sleeping bag too. I was very fortunate, he had an extra sleeping bag, so I got that from him. And I went over to the supply bunker, and I found it was empty. It was about a bunker about 10 by 10 or 12 by 12, a good sized bunker. And I got in there and I found a stretcher and a mail sack. So I took the stretcher, I set that down, and I took the mail sack, opened up the real deep, and I stuck the sleeping bag into it. And then I got undressed again and put the clothes down for a pillow, and I laid down, crawled in there, and I'm telling you, I must have slept 12 hours. I slept all night and part of the next day. And, I woke up in the morning, the snow was all over the bottom of the mail bag where it blew in during the night, but it didn't bother me. I was warm, And one of the Marines come in there and didn't see me under the snow, and I hollered, he shoved the rifle in my face. And so that was my Christmas Day in 1951.
Wow.
It's something I'll never forget. And anyhow, we stayed there. We were up in the mountains till around back and forth. You'd go down and you get relieved. And when we got relieved from the gun, we didn't get R&R, rest and recuperation. All the troops got it, but the Marines didn't get it. And at least at that time, maybe they got it later on, but in the early part of the war, they didn't get it. And but when we got off the line, we would get 3 days off from any duty at all to get cleaned up, get squared away, get your gear, get some decent food, because on the line you eat nothing but sea rations.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, there's one sergeant, he was a mess sergeant, and he was in charge of course, preparing the food. And we had been up so long, he wanted to bring us a hot meal up to us, and he set up his operation at the bottom of the hill we were on. And then the officers were letting the guys go down in shifts to get something to eat. And there must have been in the nearby hills North Korean or Chinese, I forgot who we were up against at that time. FO themselves, they must have spotted this was going on, and they lobbed some artillery in there and got a direct hit on a tent, and the poor sergeant got killed. You know, it was just a wonderful thing he was doing for us, and in the process he died. And I always felt that, I don't know, maybe he did get a Bronze Star or something, but he should have got something. And we stayed there until around March of 1952. And then the talks were going on in Panmunjom and Kaesong. And so they took the entire 1st Marine Division and they put us north of the city of Seoul, the capital. So if the communists were to make an advance on Seoul, they'd have to come through the 1st Marine Division. And that's something they didn't want to do.
Mm-hmm.
So we were there pretty much, and there ended up an awful lot of fighting up in that sector in the coming months, right up till the time I left in July 1952. We stayed there a whole year.
Mm-hmm.
Officers only stayed about 6 months, but there was a purpose for that. The Marine Corps wanted to get all its officers in the field and get combat experience. And so they would rotate their officers. They had enough officers where they would go for 6 months in their specialty.
Mm-hmm.
They all didn't go on a line company, but whatever their specialty was, that they were sent over there. We had good officers, well trained. I enjoyed working with them.
Mm-hmm.
So anyhow, I returned in July 1952.
Now, had you been wounded or
No,
injured at all during
I'll
that?
tell you what, I was blessed. We got, our biggest thing wasn't small arms. Ours was mortars and artillery. And mortars, if you're on a hill and the ammo is coming this way and you're on this side, you can duck down, you can protect yourself. But mortars come down like raindrops, they up and down. In fact, we were so close to their position that you could hear the mortars leaving the tube, the boom, boom, boom sound of the mortar as it left the tube. So you knew you were going to get incoming in a couple seconds. Give you enough time to get down and get in a ditch or hide someplace because you didn't know where the shell was going to land. And that's where most of our casualties, we had a lot of casualties just with mortars alone because you're on that line across the front. So, like I say, there's nothing you can do about it, but just cower down and cover yourself up as much as you can. So I come back in July '52 and got a 30-day leave, and then after that, with the family, friends, and neighbors, and reported to Camp Lejeune. And when I got down there, I didn't know where I was going to be assigned. Now, there's enough of confusion in my records. I'm infantry trained, and I'm artillery trained, and I'm a radio operator on a forward observation team. They probably didn't know where the heck to stick me. So I ended up in the big Marine brig at Camp Lejeune as a prison guard for 35 days. And that was tough duty. What we had in there was some really bad criminal element that Marines and Navy that committed some very heinous crimes. There was some in there, rape, robbery, murder, and it was tough. They were tough. They were. In fact, we had a few riots in there where you had to use fire hoses to suppress them. So as soon as I got a chance to get out of there, I opted to put a transfer, and I got out of there, and I was assigned to the second Engineer Battalion in communications because of the radio. But I did get more experience and training in radio there. So we stayed there until January 1954 when I got discharged. So it was in Camp Lejeune, it was boredom. It was probably the biggest enemy we had there.
Okay, were you able to obviously get out on weekend passes? And...
Oh yeah, but you know, to get home on a weekend pass, by the time you got home, you could say hello to Mom and my 8 brothers and sisters, and then turn around the next Sunday morning. You had to be traveling again very early. But only time I came home when I had a guaranteed ride. I wouldn't go home thumbing a lot of. In those days, everybody was hitchhiking, but it was too risky on time. So what I would do is, I went to Savannah, Georgia, and cities like that. It was nice, you know. And then it was always USO dances, and you know, there was something to do.
And you
But
decided...
we didn't have much money. We had very, very little money. I think we get about that time we get about $85 a month.
When you were discharged, were you a corporal?
Yeah, I was a corporal. And I remember the lieutenant came to me and tried to talk me into re-enlist, and I almost did. I was thinking about it. And you know, jobs were tight at home, a house full of, with my mother and father, 11 of us in a small house, no cellar, 2 bedrooms down for the girls, and my mother and father, and 2 bedrooms upstairs for 5 boys. It smelled like a gym bag on the 2nd floor. And so anyhow, I thought, well, when I get back home, if I can't get a job, maybe I'll re-enlist. But at that point, I didn't. And when I got back, a friend of mine from my neighborhood was a Buffalo policeman, and he said, "Why don't you take a police exam?" And I said, "I don't want to be a cop." And he said, "Well, take it. If you don't want it, if you pass the exam and you don't want the job, don't take it. But if you decide later on you'd like it, you would have wished you did take the exam, it would be too late." So he made sense, and the last day, the following day was the last day I could file. I went up to City Hall and I filed for the police exam and started going through the process. And a year and a half later, in July 15th again, I was sworn in the Buffalo Police Department in 1956.
Okay, and you did make use of the GI Bill, and you went to college during that period?
I returned to school. As I mentioned earlier, I only had a year and a half of high school. But I was always an avid reader. I'd read anything I could get my hands on, and I still do that today. So I went out and I actually started Erie County Technical Institute, but the county built a new college called Erie County Community College, and the campus was out in Amherst on Young Road, and they merged Erie County Technical Institution, which, that's my diploma's done, but they later merged it. But I went 3 years of nights and earned my associate degree in 1964, I think it was. And so I got that, and then I was studying for the promotion in the police department, and I took the lieutenant's exam, and I passed that, and then I made lieutenant in October 1969. So when I made lieutenant, I decided I would go back that fall. I enrolled at Buffalo State College, your neighbor across the street here, and I enrolled there. And in 1972, I got my bachelor's degree in criminal justice from Buffalo State College. So I had that, and then I was with the Tactical Patrol Unit in the Buffalo Police Department for 5 years, from 69 to 74, and then I was transferred up to Night Lieutenant in Narcotics Squad. A couple of years there, and then in 1976, end of June, the city of Buffalo was laying off a lot of officers, and the transfers come out, and there was an opening for the commanding officer of the training academy, and Commissioner Blair asked me if I would take it, and I said, my late wife and I discussed it, and she said, well, Tam, you've been on nights for 19 years, why don't you give it a break, give it a shot, and I did, and it's got 5 days a week, Saturday and Sunday off, and holiday, working days was a complete switch for me, so that was nice. And that same year, there was an election for sheriff. Sheriff Ken Braun got elected, and he put a committee out for applicants for undersheriff, and so I put my name in, and I was interviewed, and I got the job, and I became undersheriff. 9 years of that, and he retired. I ran for sheriff and served 12 years as a sheriff, and retired 10 years ago. So 21 years with the Buffalo Police Department, 21 years with the Sheriff's Office. So I put 42 years in law enforcement.
Wow, that's quite a career.
Yeah, I had a great career. When I think back of it, and even with all the narrow escapes in Korea and all what I saw there, in spite of it all, I kind of look back on the good times we had. There's a lot of good. I have a great friend, a fellow by the name of Tom Hurley, up in Fargo, North Dakota. I just hope his home is still standing after all the floods. But he and I were just the best chums, and we stayed in contact. I got another fellow down in Maryland I stayed in contact with, so I'm still actually talking to guys on the phone once or twice a year since back in the 50s and 60s.
Did you join any veterans organizations?
Yeah, I'm a life member of the VFW, American Legion, life member of the 1st Marine Division and 2nd Marine Division Association. I go to conventions once in a while. You don't meet a lot of old buddies, but you meet enough people to here and there, and get to different cities and have some fun and enjoy it. So I don't go every year, but every 4 or 5 years I might go to one of the conventions.
How do you think your time in the service changed or affected your life?
I think the Marine Corps, there's 3 there's three disciplines in my life that affected me. My mother was a very strong person. She was just a great, wonderful, wonderful woman. I know us Irish boys tend to have a great love affair with mothers, but there was one great lady. And so between my mother, the Marine DI and the Marine Corps training in Parris Island and boot camp, it's a discipline that you have to experience it. It's hard to tell people who are not Marine trained what it's like, but it impacts your life for the rest of your life. And the third discipline was law enforcement. Certainly, it's a quasi-military organization, so that affected me all my life.
Mm-hmm.
I'll tell you one quick story. After September 11th, 91, when the Twin Towers went down in New York, I was so mad. I was terribly angry and upset. And I really, like a lot of Americans, I wanted to strike out at somebody for what they did to us, but who they are, where they are, it was an impossibility. And my mother was gone. My mother and father both deceased in '66. So I didn't know who to call. And so I called up the Commandant of the Marine Corps' office, and I got his secretary, and I told her who I was and what I wanted. I wanted to get the name, and not the name, but the telephone number of my DI, if he was still alive. That's how much he impacted me. I reached out to him, and she called me back a couple hours later and had the number and his address. And
He was still alive.
yeah, he was still alive. I had thought he was killed in Korea, because I heard that. And so I finally, I really had to get up enough nerve. I still, fear and respect, you know, is a very close line. And I still sort of remembered how tough he was. I was almost afraid to approach him. So I called him up, told him who I was. I said, "You wouldn't remember me, it's so long ago." He said, "No, I wouldn't, but I have a picture of every platoon I put through." So he said, "What was your platoon number?" I says, "Platoon 49, March 51. He says, "Hold on." About 2 minutes later, he came back. He said, "I got you. Now, I got the photo. Where are you?" I said, "I'm the second tallest guy in the top row." He said, "Okay, I got you." And he says, "What can I do for you?" And I said, "Sarge, I really don't know." I said, "But I want to talk to you." And I kind of poured my heart out to him. I told him what this meant to me and what it was doing to me at the present time. I wanted to talk to somebody who had a tremendous impact on my life. And I said, and I thought of you. He said, "Gee, I'm flattered." So we talked, we chatted a while, and I said, "You know, Sarge, I thought you were killed in Korea." He said, "No, I was wounded twice." And I said, "Well, that figures. You're probably looking for trouble." And he went to Vietnam. He stayed in the Marine Corps. He made a career out of it. He stayed in the Marine Corps, and he went to Vietnam. He was wounded twice more over there. So he stayed until he got out in the late 70s, and he's still alive as far as I know. He'd be about 82 or 83 by now. And so we had a great talk, and I felt much better. You know, he gave me the esprit de corps, you know, rah, rah, rah type of, not a sermon, but just like a great American you would expect from a guy like him. So we talked for quite a while, and that's the last time I talked to him. I thanked him, and he said, "Good luck to you," and that was pretty much it. No, I won't tell you the other part of the story. That was about his brother-in-law. I'll leave that for some other time.
All right, you sent us some photographs. Will you hold them up and explain where they were taken?
Oh, sure. I forgot what I sent you, but, well, this here one, this picture, well, was with an infantry company that I was assigned to at the time. We were up in the mountains of the north of the 38th parallel on the east coast of Korea. This here was up on a place called Luke's Castle. It was, in fact, Jim Brady wrote about it in his book. We were up there. If you notice, I am carrying a sidearm of 45 as my TO weapon. Wasn't too cold that day, but as you can see, I had a good warm sweater on. I had a head of hair then, as twice, 3 times what I got today. And this picture was sent to me by a friend of mine, Charlie Young, down in Maryland, and it's the gun crew from Gun 6. I stay in touch. I'm over here with the arrow point. In fact, I was on a watch that day, and I had the earphones on. You notice we're all wearing these those boots.
Oh, the Mickey Mouse boots?
The Mickey Mouse boots, yeah. And this was a great crew of guys. Here we are. We're moving from one location to the other. I think this is when we started to move across the country to the west coast. I don't know them all, but there's one of the fellows is McGinnis. There was a fellow by the name of Gilbert, and Tom Hurley, my buddy from up in Fargo, and another guy by the name of Otto, another guy by the name of McGuire, and another guy by the name of Walcott. So I think I pretty much got most of the guys on the truck. You can see we were a raggedy looking bunch. We all young fellas. I think I was probably at that time one of the older ones. I was at that time 21. But here's myself and Tom Hurley, and you can see the barrel of the 105 behind us. And I had a picture of myself here in the gun.
Okay.
I was very, very skinny. I full height is 6'3", but as you can see, I'm like a candle. I'm so thin. And you see the boxes around there, and those are ammo boxes. This is Sergeant Tant. He was a heck of a good guy. He was a real nice guy. I know this guy's name, but it just escapes me right now. There's another picture, Gun 6. And I mentioned where we were located. This here is, it's very hard to see. Here's a cutaway here of Korea. And we're up here in, above the 38th parallel at that time. And here's the 38th parallel, and here's the main line of resistance right here. And we were up here. There's a place, Kaesong, up here. And so anyhow, it's hard to see from your camera, but that's pretty much the line as it goes up the whole front.
Okay.
And this was what I wrote from that story about Christmas Day in 1951. So that's about it, I guess.
All right, well, thank you so much for your interview.
You're more than welcome. I didn't think I was going to be talking that long.
You did an excellent job. Thank you.